the 2020 WLI Build Up Breakfast Clubs. We are so thrilled to have all of you here, even if it is virtually. This is a different format. This is the third virtual meeting that we have had. I hope that you all still find them a welcome and energizing part of your day, and that this continues to be a way for you to connect with other women in the industry, build relationships, and really just get to a point where you can do projects together, where you can feel like you've got a really close-knit group of women who that you are empowering and are empowering you to do better. So I'm really excited about today's program. We have three very special guests with us, Lauren Hood, Saundra Little, and Tiffany Brown. We will be getting into a panel discussion with them, but first we want to get you talking. So time to take your coffee, wake up a little bit, and we're going to put you into some breakout rooms and start a discussion. I think that the icebreaker topic today will be, what are you doing to your home to make it more cozy for the impending winter? So Victoria, when you're ready, put everybody into some breakout rooms and we'll get chatting. We are going to get started with an awesome panel discussion this morning. All of the women that we have invited to join us are doing really active work in empowering women, young people, people of color to get into land use careers, to be more active and engaged in their communities, to participate in the way that their communities get built and look and feel. So we are so excited to start this discussion. What I'm going to do is ask each of the panelists to take a few minutes to give you guys an idea of the type of work that they do, a little bit about themselves and their thinking, and then we will hop into a fireside chat. As you guys are coming up with questions for the panelists, type them into the chat and I will make sure that we get those incorporated. And then after the panel discussion, we'll go back into breakout rooms and you guys can really sort of debrief and talk about what you heard, what inspired you, what you're going to do tomorrow, next week, and next year to build on this platform of work. So Tiffany, I'd love to get you started. Tiffany Brown is the president of NOMA Detroit.
Hi, everyone. A little update. I am a former vice president of NOMA Detroit, and but I am the executive director for NOMA National. But today I'm going to talk a little bit more about an initiative that I founded a few years ago called 400 Forward. I will start with talking about my background and how I became involved in architecture, just a little bit about my journey, and then what led me here to what brought me to find my passion in justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So I will share my screen and try my best to keep this to 5 minutes, and I'm actually going to try to time myself because I am horrible with keeping time, especially when it's 5 minutes. So I have a lot to say and a lot to squeeze in. Let's see.
Tiffany, while you're getting started, I'm going to ask everybody who is still on video to go ahead and mute your video for the duration of the panel. Hopefully that gives us a little bit more bandwidth and keeps all of the speakers focused on the main screen.
All right, so I don't have my notes visible, but I'll try my best to go through this. One of these folks is me. It's the girl with the bottle down there at my grandmother's house. I grew up here in Detroit, and on Joy Road. So let me just go back. I think these are on the timer actually. So my grandmother's in this pic, my aunts are in this picture, but at this time I did not know what was in store for me in the future. Just growing up on Detroit's West Side, and right before that, or quite a few years before that, there was a gentleman, Whitney Young, who spoke at the AI convention about the condition of the profession at that time. And the point that he drove home was that if we did not do something about the diversity problem right now, then we're doing generations to come a major disservice. So I do feel like he was talking about me being included in that generation of upcoming designers. So many of us know who Jane Jacob is, and William Moses, but around that same time, they were involved in one of the biggest fights of the century with trying to create just cities. And an outcome of what Robert Moses's ideals were developments that were created in inner city communities that were meant to replace the slums that were there before, but just created another problem as far as urban design goes. And so what you're looking at here is the corner of Joy Road in Southfield, where I grew up. It was a housing development. Joy Road is the big street going across the top, and Southfield Freeway along the left side. This is what it looked like before it was demolished, but this is where I grew up. It was a gated community, but not like the ones that some folks are most familiar with. It was public housing surrounded by a wrought iron fence. And this wrought iron fence, to me, it was a black wrought iron fence that mostly symbolized not only a physical enclosure, but a mental one. So our school was actually within this development. It's in the lower right-hand corner. It's called Herman School. And lots of folks that I grew up with, a lot of my family were here. It created a sense of dependency on just being in this space and not really growing mentally. It was not something that was conducive to a creative mind like the one that I had. I was always into art and creative writing and anything that had to do with art excellence, really, and didn't know that architecture would end up being my profession. But it just goes to show that your environment plays a huge part on who you become. And as the creators of the design or the built environment that we are, it's just something that we really need to keep as a factor as we explore this JEDI idea. The next slide, you're gonna see, this is what it looked like when we moved out. So the only reason we did move out was because they were demolishing, this was one of the first federally funded housing developments in the country. Actually, the first one was Brewster Douglas on 75 and Mac, but it was a huge difference. Like, someone growing up here would never think that she would be studying architecture in Paris later down the line. So this is my class and I'm a proud alumni of Lawrence Tech University, and we did study abroad in Paris. Took a little extra trip to Spain, but growing up where I was from, I had never imagined that I would be standing in front of Monet, or I would be in the Louvre, or I would be there with a crowd of people in front of the Savoy. So these are all really important parts of my life that architecture brought full circle for me. And it was instrumental in who I became. And unfortunately, I was not exposed to architecture until the 12th grade. And after that, I ended up, I'm gonna try to fix the timer, but this is a new development that is currently standing where I grew up. It sat vacant for 10 years. And in the meantime, I went to Lawrence Tech, went through 3 degrees, had a job at Hamilton Anderson where I met Saundra Little, one of our speakers. And I had the opportunity to see construction at the place where I grew up. This is my grandmother who moved back to what's now called Garden View Estates. She's the matriarch of our family, and she's 75 years old. And it's a pleasure to be able to take part in that. For someone who grew up in developments like this, this is Brewster Douglas, what it looked like before. That was at the, so I was part of the demolition team that demolished those buildings, and that's when I realized there was no one that looked like me on the project teams or at the construction site. And that was my calling to go out and find them, and especially Detroiters, bring them to the table. So I want to share with you some statistics that have been updated, but that number in brackets represents licensed architects in this country. The number, just about 20,000 represent women, and then the third number is African Americans who are licensed architects in our country. And if anyone could guess what the number 500 represents, you probably have a little hint just now because of the advancing slides. But the number 500, which is also 0.4%, not even 0.5% of the total licensed architects in the country, represent Black women. So growing up, I wasn't sure how I was supposed to identify with, like, you can be what you can't see is a term that I've heard a few times. These are women licensed. Some of them are my colleagues, or most of them are my colleagues and friends, my mentors. 13 of them, 12 of them actually are licensed in Michigan. And so 400 Forward is an initiative that I started to expose girls to architecture with an online focus on African American girls. And these are just some of the mentees that you see here with an event that we did with Ford. So I'm able to offer financial support. I'm able to partner with lots of companies, community engagement events, and I'm able to mentor and expose these young ladies to something that they probably didn't know that they wanted to be part of. So I'm going to try to wrap up as I get through. I'm way past my time. Seeking out points of exclusion, identifying situational challenges, and recognizing personal biases are some things that I want to touch on in our conversations today. And then lastly, providing equivalent experiences is how we can address the situation. And then also extending that solution to everyone. Who makes it is a big question for me when someone mentions JEDI. It's who's exposed, who has access to these fields as a career, and what are we doing to make them accessible? This is Kat Holmes, who wrote a book on inclusive design that I had the opportunity to contribute to as an expert contributor. And then this is me in front of my old elementary school that I hope to one day reopen. Part of a documentary that I was in called Design for All, streaming on Hulu. So I would like to pass the mic to Saundra.
Thanks so much for that, Tiffany. Tiffany, your audio, we could understand what you were saying, but we were getting a little bit of feedback. Would it be possible for you to call in, and then Victoria will link up the phone number to your video, so maybe we can get a clearer shot.
Yeah, I did see a it says the speaker connection. I've never seen that before, so yes, I apologize if you guys were not able to hear me.
We could tell what you were saying. It was just not the clearest.
Okay.
Okay, thanks so much. All right, Saundra.
Yeah, I guess Victoria just told me she may need me to share my screen. Is that still the case?
Yes, my apologies there.
Okay.
Now I'm having tech issues.
Okay, let me see what I can do here.
Oh boy.
All right, no problem. Actually, Tiffany's presentation was a great introduction to the numbers and diversity and within the profession of architecture. And it's kind of the same way I know in real estate. So it's a perfect segue into this. And when we were talking, actually Lauren, Tiffany, and myself, we were all talking about how we were transitioning into new positions between all of us. And it was actually an interesting time when we started to talk. Everybody was almost getting an update what the other person was doing. So for me, the big transition has been I going from being a small firm owner of my own design practice for over a decade to now a principal and director of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Quinn Evans Architects. Um, and I just want to kind of talk through that process and then dive into um, mentorship and with architectural practice is what I've been focusing on. So um, I put this up here real quick. These are the brand principles for Quinn Evans, and they were released last year as part of our new branding effort, and our new logo and everything came out. And Thrive in Diversity was part of our brand principles with that rebranding. And I definitely coming into the firm new, I definitely believe that the firm was well on this pathway before we got into this pandemic, as one of our mentors say, Steve Lewis, the dual pandemics. We got racial uh, uh, equity issues coming to the forefront along with coronavirus. But Quinn Evans has actually been basically leading the way, walking the talk with diversity. And that kind of what led to my firm being acquired by Quinn Evans at the end of 2018. After working with this company like for 3 years jointly as a small firm. Um, this is a spread from Quinn Evans in our March social media that rolled out, and everybody know that's for the Women's Month. But a lot of people don't know about Quinn Evans, and they don't tout it a lot, which really astounded me when I started to work with them. That to be in the architecture profession that has the numbers that Tiffany shown, Quinn Evans is actually 53% women employed at Quinn Evans Architects. So it's a large majority of women in this architectural firm, with the goal of, and actually it was like 46% is owned in the stocks of Quinn Evans as well, which is rare. Um, Quinn Evans has grown a lot over the last 3 to 4 years, all through acquisitions, similar to my firm and larger in different cities, and just help to increase those diversity numbers as well. So just to see a firm that walks the walk has been amazing. I've actually, like I said, been charged too with being the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Quinn Evans, and the 4 E's here that are shown here are what our JEDI committee is focusing on. And just like what Tiffany said, exposure to the to kids knowing that architecture is a career option. Even internally, we have or education for the external colleges and universities bringing in interns, but internally, we're trying to support our minority staff and our entire staff towards architectural licensing to help increase those numbers and experience. So this is kind of a 10-year history of what I had been doing right prior to me starting my own firm, and all the way up until this timeline is continuing today. But Tiffany and I, like, we're both actively involved in the National Organization of Minority Architects that actually goes out and advocates for more diverse numbers in the profession and exposure. And both of us are charter members of the NOMA Detroit chapter starting here in 2007. But I've been a past president of NOMA Detroit. Now I am a Midwest vice president on the National NOMA board, still continuing the mission, reaching out to students. And it's actually landed me to a place now where I'm kind of looking at the students that I impact. The numbers on here shows over time, the outreach that I've been doing external to my architectural practice, the numbers were astounding. So I definitely wanted to continue to do that. And actually started another initiative, Noir Design Party, in 2016 that documents the work of African-American architects in Michigan, because I think that is almost like when the movie Hidden Figures came out, that's how I feel about the story of my African American architects in Michigan. It's a hidden story, so we're exposing those stories. With Karen Burton and I, she's actually on the call as well. So within Quinn Evans, there's a lot of organizations that we outreach to keep those numbers up. Like I said, I mentioned National Organization of Minority Architects. The Christopher Kelly program was with the American Institute of Architects, which one of our, actually my past employees at my firm who actually came over to Quinn Evans with us, Shanita Rutland is a co-chair that runs the Detroit part of that. But we keep these organizations that we outreach to that are partners to our architectural firm. You know, it's more than just having clients. We have these, community partners that help us keep diversity on a forefront. So in the past, when I had my own practice, I actually would bring students into the firm and actually, give them real project experience. So this is Aaron Anderson. He's actually now enrolled at the North Carolina State University. This is a model that he worked on here. That is actually a house that was a addition that he got to see the construction of that as well while in the architectural practice. This is Vincent Bennett. He actually worked with me for a number of years. And this is him at a community engagement event. He's been out field measuring. He's learned a lot about architecture. He started with me, working with me with the Grow Detroit Young Talent Program, which is a City of Detroit program that I advise everybody if you're looking to expose young Detroiters to career options. That is a viable way to do it, to employ students for the summer, and they do have special winter internships as well. This is Naive, actually same thing. She was part of the Grow Detroit Young Talent program, and she is a U of D student and currently now working with another architect that I know. So she is moving along in architecture, and it's just great to see these students go from high school, working with them from high school all the way up to college. And this is Tiana Parker, and she actually, this is her and I on a job site at Coleman A. Young. And she actually spent the summer in our office at a Quinn Evans, and was able to go with me to the judging for the AXO program with the NAACP to see other students compete in architecture and arts. And she has an interest in art and trying to figure out if architecture is her pathway. So she was an 11th grader when this happened last year. So I need to touch base with her and see if she's made that decision about the pathway to architecture, because this is her senior year. So this is over the years, actually having the students come in every year. I have the students come back. We do a Christmas movie day, and everybody comes back over the years. So it's been really interesting to see people come back to the firm over the years and share the stories, and we still keep that community connection between us. And this is the project that I was talking about, Noir Design Partie, which documents the work of African-American architects. This is the winning cohort here of us winning that grant. Karen Burton is actually in this picture too. So we won the grant, and we have a website up, noirdesignpartie.com, which is telling those all important stories of the history of African-American architects' work in the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan. So we've curated talks, we've had tours, exhibits. We have YouTube channels up now with panel discussions that are upcoming. And we have a transcript from this talk we did on the importance of archiving Black history that is going to be available on our website, and also is available on the Detroit Sound Conservancy website now with the audio recording from this. This is a series of talks we did for Design 139 with the City of Detroit, Bedrock, and Design Corps hosting these salon talks during the month of design. And here is a talk that we did with those, I think it is 13 living licensed African-American women architects in the state of Michigan. So it's only 13 of us. And we had a large number of us at a curated talk that we did as part of that event as well. This was the second talk where we had all of these ladies come together and kind of share their stories and their journeys. So just keeping all of that to the forefront, keeping diversity at the forefront has been my focus. So. That's all I have, and I can hand it over to Lauren.
Thanks so much for that, Saundra. It always amazes me when you throw out that 13 number, because I always think, gosh, maybe we know most of them, like
Yeah, yes, because you literally could
you
get
just
us almost on
know.
you can count it on your hands.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a whole bunch of them on this call.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Thanks so
But
much.
thank you.
The identities that I'm bringing to the table when I do this work. So there's one half of me that has some very insider privilege. So I am a paid professional that works in planning disciplines. I'm educated in planning disciplines. I'm an appointee to the City Planning Commission, and all of those identities have some access. There's a certain opinion that comes with those identities. Like there's a me that really likes hanging out in the Shinola Hotel. It's a beautiful space, it's centrally located. But at the same time, my outsider identities are side-eyeing that place because of the way they kind of capitalized on the Detroit identity of like this grittiness. So there's a Black native Detroiter, Lauren, that's like, that's shady, I don't like it. But there's this privileged insider me that's like, oh, it's so cool here. And I can say hi to all my other designer and urban planner friends. So those are always at conflict as I approach this work. And it's always challenging for me when people ask, like, what do you do? What I've settled on is I am in the business of changing people's minds. So it's not so much a do thing, it's more about an approach. And I'm recognizing when I work with people in planning and development, I'm not so concerned about the what of what they're doing, but like, what is their approach? What is the thinking that they're bringing to the table when they're doing this work? So I'm in the changing mind space. I'm here to throw out some new ideas. We've had some things go down this year that I think have shifted global consciousness so that we can't think like we used to think. We just can't, it's not possible. There's no going back. You can't unsee what you saw this year. So I've been thinking about what are the new approaches? And I've been doing some study recently on, as a Black person working in planning development, I'm really interested in what does it mean to have a thriving Black community. In the planning disciplines, a lot of the work is led by white folks. It's funded by a lot of white-led institutions. And it's always been my contention that we need more Black thought at the top of the pyramid. So I was like, what are the examples where Black folks have led in creating thriving communities? So I've ended up doing a lot of research on the Black bottom neighborhood. So everything you may have heard about Black bottom neighborhood has to do with like the state of the buildings and the physical conditions. But Black folks who were around then speak very fondly about Black bottom because of the cultural richness, because of the relationships that people had with each other. Black people own the businesses. There was a sense of pride that people had about it. So there's something to a community besides the built environment. And in doing research about Black bottom, I came across this quote from a professor at U of M. And he says that tens of thousands of poor, mostly Black citizens were dislocated in the name of civic progress. They saw their homes, businesses, and communities praised, bought, and destroyed without their input or permission. Now, he is talking about what happened through this period of quote unquote urban renewal, which ULI has some explaining to do about how they behaved at that point in time. But this could be said about what is happening in Black communities now. Like, why is that? Have we not learned anything? If these same conditions are happening some 30, 40, 50 years later, we have to have new approaches. Next slide. So what I have landed on is that you need to center the Black experience when you're doing work in Black communities. It's so odd to me that we kind of make Black opinions, Black aspirations, like secondary to the work we're doing in communities. We do this superficial, like community engagement. All the RFPs are like, you have to have 3 community meetings. I'm like, that is such bullshit. It just, you're asking about quantity and not quality. Like I could have 3 meetings, but they could be crappy. I could do all the talking and people's voices don't get heard. We need to be more focused on the quality of the relationships we're building with people in community and how we're letting people's voices and prioritizing their values, wants, aspirations. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put Afro in front of the urbanism so that we know that we're thinking about Black folks in this work. And I've kind of landed on a set of principles around what I'm calling reparations. So I've been thinking about reparations a lot lately, reading about them. And in my mind, it's not like white folks, Black folks are coming for all your money. That is not what reparations means. But if we can think about reparations in terms of repair, like at the root of that word is the concept of repairing past damage. And we don't, when we approach communities about getting community benefits or doing engagement, it really gives all of the power to the developer or the group of planners and the consultant team. But what does it look like to really center the lived experience and aspirations of the folks that are there? So I'm retiring words like equitable development, community engagement, and community benefits, because I don't think they're not bold enough. We know too much now. Those are pre-George Floyd terms, and I'm not using them anymore. So the new way I want to talk about it is reparations. And it's the difference between saying, please developer, may we have some benefits, to being like, no, we've been served some injustice and we're owed something. So it's more just a way of thinking and not looking for a handout for communities. Next slide. So like I said, here's the definition. Afro-urbanism centers the lived experience of Black people in the design and creation of Black communities. It puts Black culture at the fore, taking into account past harms, current challenges, and future aspirations of Black citizens. Next slide. So each of the letters in the repair have a principle associated with it. And I think if you can do one or more of these in any of the work you're doing, we're getting at the heart of kind of repairing past harms, which is really what we need to be doing. So reckoning with the history. I can't tell you how many times I have worked with colleagues on a strategic plan process in a neighborhood where the folks didn't do their research on the history of the neighborhood. So people are showing up kind of angry and disgruntled to a community meeting, and people are like, well, I don't understand. I'm like, did you do your research? Do you know what happened here? Do you know like who's at fault and like the years of disinvestment and the promises that were made that were broken? Like if you did a little bit of research into the history, you would understand so much more about the people and the places that we're working in. Empowering people. How can we flip the script to this dynamic where the developers have all the power or where city government has all of the power? How can we flip the script into a dynamic where people in the community have more power over planning their futures? Preserving the culture. I've heard so many times from people on different projects in neighborhoods and planning processes. People want nice things, but they're like, please don't gentrify us. They want to maintain their culture. Everybody wants new things, but people don't want to lose their culture. People don't want to lose the way they communicate. People don't want to have to lose the way they celebrate. There are so many stories across the country about Black folks. Like, we used to have this drum circle in the park down the street, but then the hipsters moved in and they called the police. Now we can't do that anymore. Like, how do you welcome new people, welcome new development, but preserve the culture that is so important to the way people engage with each other? Asset framing. So often when we're talking about Black communities, we start with what's wrong. You talk about it from a deficiency place. You talk about blight. It's usually about all of the things that are bad within that community. But can you look at Black communities and be like, oh, there's some rich culture there. There's some strong organizations there. There's a strong network. Everybody in that community knows each other. So what does it look like to asset frame instead of deficit frame? Activating imagination. Often when we ask people in community, like, what do you want for your future? They're so focused on fighting things. They're fighting gentrification. They're fighting foreclosures. They're fighting to have their voices heard. But I feel like all of that fighting kind of, it deadens your imagination about what's possible. So when someone asks you what you want, it's like, can you turn the lights on? Can I have my trash picked up? Like, and that kind of frame is so limiting as far as what is possible in terms of building a future. You really need to work at activating people's imagination around what is really possible for the future of our communities. And lastly, restoring the spirit. I feel like getting folks to the table is kind of an old way of thinking. Getting people to have voice at the table is not quite there either. It's more about how do you make sure people are whole when they're showing up? So if I'm fighting all this stuff and you're asking me to come to the table to talk about the future of my community, like what kind of headspace am I in to really show up? So restoring the spirit is kind of, I think, is my true north. When I think of what a thriving community is, it's like the people are whole in that place. It's not about the buildings or what's happening in the vacant lot. It's like the people have a strong sense of self and are walking around whole. So that is my true north. And I think I have one more slide. Yep, back to my true north is really about people being restored to wholeness. And this is a picture of folks in Black Bottom. So everything I grew up hearing about it was bad. And again, Black folks have a different kind of opinion about this place. I recently led some folks through a community visioning process. I was like, of all the places in the world that you've ever been or ever fantasized about going to, like, what is your favorite and why? And the first woman that spoke said Black Bottom. So that is kind of like, it's really reshaped my thinking about what is important to people. Because again, she wasn't thinking about the buildings or the streetscapes. What she remembered was this, like how people felt about themselves and how they felt about their community. And that is all.
Well, certainly is not all, but it's a really good start. So I wanted to sort of touch on something that Tiffany spoke to in her early comments, and she was talking about identifying the points of exclusion. So I think that there are some really, obvious ones that we can all kind of think of in general, but when it comes to specifically land use, when it comes to the group of women that we have on this call who all participate in different aspects of the built environment in different ways, where can they or where should they be focusing on those, that ability to recognize those points of exclusion and trying to make sure that they're counteracting that to the best of their ability? And Tiffany, I'm going to start with you because that was one of the points in your slides, if you're comfortable with that.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Okay. Give me 1 second because something is happening with my screen now. I can promise you that I really don't have any type of technical difficulties usually, but for me, seeking out points of exclusion based on my experience is more so exposure and the financial barriers that almost kept me from making it to Lawrence Tech to study architecture in the first place. Just not being exposed to architecture as a profession. I was in a neighborhood I actually attended some schools, some inner city schools where we didn't have a lot of career days and a lot of professionals coming to those schools. And you have students like me there who love art, who love math, just interested in all those things. And that's a point of exclusion there. I just wasn't seeing, whether they look like me or not, I wasn't seeing these professionals. I would have loved to have seen women coming to my school. And so that is why I really enjoy going to the inner city schools, because I can see myself in these students and I know that they can see themselves in me. But it's also important that they see other people who may not look like them that still care. And it does need to be genuine, because kids can tell when your job is sending you, or when you're there because you have to be. And so that's one point of exclusion that could be addressed. Mentor someone who doesn't look like you. And then another point of exclusion, it's very expensive to become an architect. It's very expensive to study architecture. I went into Lawrence Tech from Detroit Public Schools with as a first generation college graduate. I was the first person in my family to go to college. And so I didn't really know what it would take to study architecture. about the licensure process, about how expensive the resources to study for those expensive exams would be. And so there were a lot of financial barriers for me, even scaling back and just dealing with things as scholarship wise, just to get through a semester. So a lot of times when you see these initiatives like 400 Forward, and I did put in the chat, you could visit 400forward.com to partner with us. There are a lot of us who've already established relationships with community engagement efforts and different groups in the city who have access to students who want to study architecture and design, urban design, real estate, lots of things. And if you don't already have those partnerships, you can partner with one of us and or just provide funding. Sometimes that's what people want to do. They've raised all this money. They need to give it to someone who knows what to do with it, knows where to find the students who need it. And I'm just happy to be in a position where I can provide that to the students of Detroit and other parts of the country, really. So exclusion for me is reflective of inclusive design because of the way that I was excluded and did not have access to a lot of things that I needed.
Yeah, that's great. Lauren, do you want to add to that?
Sorry, will you ask it again?
So I was asking, Tiffany mentioned that one of the first steps is sort of recognizing those points of exclusion. And, we've got 50 plus, land use professional women on the line. What can they be doing to better recognize those points of exclusion and counteract them? What were some steps that they should be taking to counteract them?
That's a good point. I guess talk to people in schools, donate your time. For me, I didn't even know community development was a career path. Kind of stumbled across it. I actually went back to grad school to get an MBA, and I was like, oh, this is soul crushing. This is not what I thought it was going to be. I was like, I thought they were going to teach me how to be an amazing entrepreneur because I had a vision for like a culture space.
Right.
But while I was in a class in the MBA program, and this woman was like, we have a Master's of Community Development program. I think that's more up your alley. And I'm like, that's a thing? So I think it's more about making people aware. So to the extent you can, like, get in schools and talk to people about the fact that these are viable careers. Because, for Black folks, like my parents came up and had to go through the Depression. So for them, they were always like, just get at some company and stay there until you die and have some benefits. So for them, it was so much about security. So they're always like, don't you want to do like engineering or like one of those guaranteed career path jobs? Like, no one is going to be pushing folks into community development because you don't really know that you can thrive at it. I actually didn't learn the thriving part till a couple of years ago. Like, they kind of teach you in grad school for community development, like, you're not going to make enough money, but you're doing good work.
Yeah.
But then, yes, I had to have a white male colleague be like, no, we're getting money out here. You see how much people are getting paid? I was like, oh, I can ask for more money? But you need an ally. So yeah, to the extent that you can, be honest with people about how much money is out there. Because I now, I see rate sheets. Sometimes when I get asked to join a consultant team and they'll send me the response to the proposal that was sent and it'll have the fees blacked out. I'm like, why do you all do that? And then I saw one, someone actually sent me one with the fees in there. And I'm like, oh, that's why, because you don't want people to know that what you're getting is like a couple times more than what everybody else on the team is getting. So if we can be honest with people about the fact that you can actually have a good living off of the planning and development disciplines, and that there are different kinds of skill sets that you can use in different roles. I think that there's an emerging need for people who know about arts and culture to be in community development. There's a need for people who know better how to talk to community, because people take for granted, like, oh, I can do community engagement. I'm like, you can't. You do not have the demeanor to like elicit good responses from people or build connections. Like, people, some architects that I have worked with, they think they have been, you didn't learn that in school. Did you have a community engagement class in school? You do not know how to talk to folks that don't look
Especially
like
a Detroiter.
Oh my gosh, yes, there's a special way we like to be addressed. So I think though that what I'm saying with that is that there are roles that different kinds of native Detroiter like young Black kids could play in the community development ecosystem that are non-traditional, that are emergent.
That's great.
I,
Saundra, do you have
I
anything?
agree with yeah, it's true. Like you know, it's everybody's coming from a different background, and you know, and learning what the pinch points are to each cultural and ethnic background. It should be a sensitivity that every person has to look out for. It, and it's basically looking at the tables that you're at and saying, okay, you heard it before, is everybody at this table? You know, and if we don't have professionals from different backgrounds and histories coming to the table, we're not getting diverse development, diverse urban planning, diverse planned buildings. You know, so it's just taking a moment to look like, okay, if it's all homogeneous and you as you look across this table, you need to change this picture of the table. It's just fair to our future community. And some of the things that Lauren talked about with kind of repairing history, I mean, that's the key right there too. I mean, that's something that I pretty much got into the latter part of my career, understanding the history of what has happened to communities in Detroit and across the country. And you know, and then being able to say, wait a minute, it's still parts of that history and stories that are not told. And how do you get that out to the forefront? That's kind of where, you know, when noir design partie comes in. It's like I looked in some of the books in Michigan, and I didn't see African American architects. So how, like I said, how can you be what you don't see? So that story needs to be there for people to understand. Yes, it was tough. The first licensed African American firms that started in Detroit were in the 1940s, you know, and that when that firm started, they couldn't go, they were the first graduates from University of Michigan in the School of Architecture. When they started, they couldn't go to a majority firm and get a job. So they were the first firm owners in the city of Detroit as well. So it's like they are the pioneers, they are the trailblazers that had to pave that way. That, you know, it's a reason the numbers are low in the profession. You have to look at that history too, and how do we correct that now? So that's part of what I've been able to uncover, and I've learned a lot. Just like I said, learning the fact that, you know, like I said, these first firms starting, they were the first, and they became incubators to the next generation of Black architects coming through the city. And it wasn't, you know, and you know, it just takes time for this to happen. And then, you know, then Coleman Young, and then things opened up, and then some of the structures you see today are from an area where, you know, Black professionals were allowed to design and to showcase their talent. And I think it's important for, if you're recruiting young students, to, you know, be able to show them this. Because if you Google architects on the internet, you're going to see all white faces come up. You get Zaha Hadid is your only diverse Google search person you're going to get, and everybody else is a white male. So you gotta put the picture out there for people to see something different. So,
yeah. And can I add to that, Shannon, really quickly? So I did want to touch on some things that Lauren and Saundra covered. We do need allies, and that's in folks who don't look like us, because just as she said, and you saw the statistics, we're not represented in the communities, in the profession. It's not a reflection of what the way that our communities look today, especially Detroit, is not a reflection of what our profession looks like. And so I can honestly say, while at Smith Group, and I definitely had white male mentors, and they took the time to make sure that I had the professional development support that I needed, One of them is Carl Rowling. One of them is just Jeff Houseman. Like a lot of us know these guys. And a lot of them were some of the white women that I work with at Smith Group who are principals. They are in leadership positions at Smith Group, who were also trained by white male, so it's kind of, it needs to be a full circle experience. And we absolutely do need those allies. But I know that because I had those allies, I was able to become a project manager and have get the experience that I needed in that position and the support that I needed in that position. So
It's true. It's very true what Tiffany said. Liz Nibby was my ally to me coming to Quinn Evans, and just to see, the work that she started out, when she started at Quinn Evans, she was the only woman on the board of directors there. And, and then Liz got to a point, she retired last year, going out, winning the American Institute of Architects gold medal. But then to find out she still was the first still the first woman to win the AIA Detroit gold medal. You're still coming to the point where you still have these firsts. And we have a lot more work to do if we're still having first of everything. So, but yeah, the allies definitely, partnerships definitely all help.
Tiffany, I'm curious, did you have to seek out that ally or mentorship?
So it's funny. I had already had a relationship with Carl and Jeff, because just sometimes, it's the squeaky wheel who gets the oil. I've always been a very vocal person in my adult life, not as a kid. I was very shy and quiet, believe it or not. But there was a project that came up where we had a Black woman in leadership there, and she required that the project team, because it was a city project, a city government project, the project team needed to be diverse. And she said, in order for Smith Group to work on this, you're going to need to bring in some diverse leadership, and don't go get your secretary and put your secretary on the org chart. And so that's when I was approached, and that was Sharon Madison. A lot of you may know Sharon. Her family is in architecture and engineering in Michigan and in Ohio, but she's in Detroit right now, and she was a commissioner at the city. And that's when Carl came to me and said, "Would you like to take this opportunity? I know that you are interested in management. I have a Master of Architecture and an MBA." And because I was approached by Carl, who was someone that I trusted, and Jeff, who was someone that I also trusted, I knew that they weren't just bringing me onto this project because of what I look like. And they knew what my goals were, and they saw an opportunity for me, and they made sure that I didn't fail. So when you provide an opportunity with making it okay to fail and learn from whatever your mistakes are, that's where growth happens. And that's what, like, those are the opportunities that need to be made available, because sometimes, those opportunities are not available because of what someone looks like. But because I was trained by the former president and the CEO of Smith Group, that's Carl Rowling, recently retired from Smith Group. But that was a privilege for me, because he was so good at what he does. He trained most of the women at Smith Group too, in Detroit, the Detroit office. And I'll always speak highly of him and Sharon, because I was scared. I'm a single mom. I have a gymnast. My daughter is in gymnastics, and I'm always traveling with her. It was just that's just something that we face as women in general, is like these opportunities to lead, and you kind of second guess yourself, to think if you're capable of doing it or not. So I went through all these different phases, and Carl also told me about the phases that he went through when he took the job as president at Smith Group. He didn't think he could do it, and there were times that he wanted to quit, and so as long as I have mentors like him and Sharon and Saundra, and people to where I see all this hope in Lauren, like, just Lauren, you are just a glowing gold nugget here in Detroit. And I'm just really happy to be connected to women like you and all the ladies at ULI and the ones on this call, because it shows that we're all interested in making the change that we want to see in our communities, that we need in our communities to create just cities.
Well said, Tiffany, well said.
Yeah, that's great. So we've got a bunch of questions in the chat, but I've got one more thing that I want to touch on before we start kicking into those. Lauren, I don't know if you brought it up today, but in previous discussions, you had talked about this concept of having to unlearn a lot of things before we can sort of move forward to learning how to do better and move forward. Do you not want to talk about that?
Oh, I'm trying to think about how to do it briefly, in a short amount of time. Because it's something I could have talked about in like my identity piece. Let me just go into a little bit. So grew up on the northwest side of Detroit in a all Black middle class neighborhood, got shipped out to the suburbs to a mostly white private school. And there's this heavy conditioning, like no one directly tells you like where you came from is bad or the color of your skin is bad, but you kind of absorb that by the things that are going on, by the things you like. I knew how to make a latke before I knew what Kwanzaa was, if that tells you about whose culture was prioritized. We were singing songs about dreidels, but nobody ever told me that Black folks also have a holiday celebration that is African centered. So in that environment, I think what I internalized was that to leave Black culture behind and Blackness behind and Detroit behind meant I could be successful. And I had internalized that the reason the city looks like it does is because Black folks didn't care, because Black folks were lazy. Like I internalized these things because of the environment I was in and things that I was hearing. So yeah, unlearning all that. Learning social justice, learning about African-American contributions, because even at this like supposedly elite top-notch education private school, we didn't learn about Black history. There were no Black people in my history book. So I didn't know about our contributions. So I had internalized that I had nothing to offer and people that looked like me had nothing to offer. So I had to unlearn all of that before I could even get to a place where, and this is what got me into community development. I'm like, oh, hell no. I'm like, I got to tell more people that we learned the wrong thing. So I like, my job is to help other Black folks unlearn as well, because we internalize this, it's white supremacy. And I know that word like, some people, but what it just means that you think white ideas are better. White ideas, white ways of living, white ways of developing communities. But this is what we learn and we're programmed with. So yeah, I had to unlearn all of that. And I think what got me into this work was like, I need to tell more people. That's all I'm trying to do is to show people what I learned and try to help more people unlearn. But I mean, once you like have that lens and you see the world completely differently. So everybody needs to sharpen that critical thinking lens so that they can start to recognize the ways in which, the commonly accepted practices are really harmful to people. They're really harmful to Black folks. They're oppressive, and we just keep doing it. It's right. Cyclical. We're in another wave of urban renewal right now, which my mom is always like, Negro removal. I can't tell you how many times she's like, Dick Gregory said urban renewal was Negro removal. Like, that's what we call it. Like, that's what it meant. It meant getting Black folks out of community so you could polish it up and put new white people in there. And we're still doing it. We're still doing it. So we need to, unlearn and relearn.
I have to say, like, I've been very fortunate too. So like, together with what Tiffany was talking about and what Lauren's talking about, because I've been at Quinn Evans, now I get exposure to another level of how to affect change, right? So, to hear about and to talk with Dr. Mindy Philolove because of a talk series that we had at Quinn Evans called Queries and Theories, and I was able to talk with her and do we've been having these talks where you talk with an outside consultant and with someone within our practice, and how can we move the needle forward with these two perspectives. And just to hear her talk about the emotional feelings that people feel for, from urban renewal and loss of community and loss of space, to hear that come from a clinical background it really was just, eye-opening and moving to me. I recommend people to, look at her books, read her books. I'm reading Root Shock now. Actually, our whole office is reading Root Shock now, by Dr. Mindy Full of Love. And it's a lot of entrenched, you know, feelings and things to unlearn, things to move past, as well as advance your career. So it's just like, it's almost like you're dealing with another layer. And then another layer to that is that now that you're here, you have, like I know I've had this discussion with a lot of Black women before. Once you make it to a certain level, you feel responsible now that you're here. How do I reach back and make sure somebody else makes it? It's just like you carry that as a burden. It's like, it's something that, I want to help someone else make it to the other side. I got to. There's ways we can affect change. There's things that we can affect the community with. And how do you keep moving the needle forward? So it's a layering of emotions sometimes with the work that we do. And uncovering history, all of that. Yeah.
Mhm. And just to also contribute to the unlearning process, something that really stuck with me as I attended Lawrence Tech, it's a predominantly white school. I did not see any diversity in what was seen as scholarship or beauty in architecture or beauty in urban design. I didn't have any Black instructors. I didn't learn about any Black architects. I didn't learn about Paul Williams, who had to sit across from his clients because back then, and these were celebrity clients like Lucille Ball and Frank Sinatra, he had to sit opposite them because Black people couldn't sit next to white people at that time. So he sketched upside down. Those are things that would have been really encouraging to me. On top of learning about European architecture, it's the stamp of approval for what's beautiful in the built environment. We need to unlearn that scholarship reflects what is European, and beauty in buildings reflects what they did in Paris and Greece, and only that. One of the things I really love about my city is the historic architecture here. The Guardian Building, working at Smith Group and being in the Guardian Building and looking at that beautiful, I call it Art Deco heaven, the lobby of the Guardian Building. It's one of my favorite styles of architecture because of the color and the texture and all these things. So these are the things that I love to teach the girls that I mentor. These are the things that I love to bring up when I'm talking to kids in Detroit's inner city schools. Because as much mentorship I eventually was able to receive, it is absolutely my duty to hand that down to the generation coming behind me, and make sure that my colleagues, no matter what they look like, understand the importance of doing that. So there's a lot of unlearning that needs to happen with our youth and with the professionals today.
Yeah, thanks for that. There's a lot of sort of discussion in the chat about this idea of creating a culture where it's okay to fail. And I think that goes a little bit into, what you were saying, Saundra, with, getting up the ladder and, you have this sense of responsibility to put your hand back, which kudos to you, because a lot of, I think historically what we've seen is people maybe not thinking there's room for more people at the top of the ladder, or that you need to fight as hard as I fought to get up that ladder. So kudos that you feel that responsibility to help pull some people up. But what does creating a culture where the freedom to fail is okay, particularly when I think just as women, and this is probably just going to be a real broad generalization, we have more of a tendency to want to make sure that we've crossed our T's and dotted our I's because we've got to do things, twice as thorough, to sort of not put that lens of critique upon us.
That's very true. It's tough. It's tough to create or it was, well, I'll put it two ways. So like when I had my own business, I felt like that was the atmosphere that I wanted to create, and I made sure that I created in um, my own firm. So it's like I felt like it was a studio. I felt like we were all practicing together. Those photos that you see is like we're all learning together. Don't feel like you know, have to get everything totally right. They do call it the practice of architecture, right? We didn't all come here knowing something all from day one. Um, but finding sometimes larger organizations that have that same culture is tough to do. Um, so my business partner, I had a business partner before we all came over to Quinn Evans, and we talked through that whole thing before we came, and it was like, well, you know, you weigh out your pros and cons, but we both were in agreement. Like we've teamed with other firms before, and we know this is a firm that we can come into and still continue that same culture with. So it's finding that place of a cultural fit that does the same thing. So when Liz Nibby left, I directly report for the director of diversity, design, and inclusion to Larry Barr, which is the president of Quinn Evans. And for him to have that same mentality, like, you know, you have room. I jokingly tell him, I feel like you give me enough room to run, and that you just don't allow me to run off a cliff. And then he jokingly said, well, how do I know if you can fly if you don't run off the cliff? So it's just finding that. So how do you know? It's finding that culture that you have room in, and if it's people in certain cultures, think about how do you create space to let people grow. I mean, it's a little bit of having an entrepreneurial spirit within your everyday day-to-day thing, and you can do that in a business sense and still make things work. So it's just thinking about things a little bit differently. I know that there are procedures, there's things you do need structure. It's almost like if you could change that structure into a framework versus just a rigid process, then you give people a little room to grow and to move. So I think I think it's possible. Like I said, I think it's needed. Like I said, I've heard people from the past actually within African American practices, you know, tell, you know, if I make it, you can make it too. And they didn't reach back. It does happen, but you know, I'm running with a group now that I see a growing number of people who are willing to reach back.
Yeah.
So
Let me throw in too. I think it is true for Black folks and probably women. Like we have more at stake if we fail. If you put a Black person in a leadership role and they don't do well, then usually people think like, oh, that we tried Black people and it didn't work. You know, like we get one shot. And sometimes with women too, like we put a woman in that role and it didn't work.
Or we can't find them. That's another one.
Or we can't find them. So I think that there's just more at stake when you're talking about marginalized groups of people, and we have to be intentional about not letting one person like shape an opinion of a whole group, unless they did really well. But you need to be open to the idea that one person is different from, like, no group is a monolith. So you have to give more chances. Yeah. And I remember hearing about this, some marketing agency in Ferndale where the owner used to give away awards for failure. So if you can implement something like that, you know, or you circle around with your team every week and be like, how did you fail miserably this week? You know, so it's not so just so that people have, you know, the freedom of spirit to try things, because we're so like, oh, I don't want to mess up, because I would get so much more done in this life if I wasn't afraid of like making a mistake. I've got like binders full of amazing ideas, but I'm so like, oh, but what if it doesn't work? You know, but we need to be taught that making a mistake is okay, and there'll be other chances.
Yeah. And it really ties into what you were saying earlier, Lauren, about we can't just keep doing things the way that we've always done them, because that's the way they've always been done. If you don't,
I can't tell you how many times I've heard that as a response. Well, we've always done it this way. And I have those same questions about the Constitution. If it's not working, but that's another convo.
We were just talking about that in the chat, where I think it was Melissa who asked to expand on the being provided the opportunity to fail. And I just mentioned in the chat that maybe we look at it as giving yourself the room to grow. You know, you're more comfortable with taking risks and chances at something that you've never done before, whether it be a leadership role. You know, you're afraid of a promotion that you're going to get, and all you can think about is how you don't know what you're doing. Like I've been there. I didn't think that I would be able to get through college, you know, because I don't think I visited a college campus before I got to Lawrence Tech. So I just told myself that it had to be done. That's how I got through college. That's how I got through working at Hamilton Anderson. That's how I got through working as a project manager, and had never been a project manager before. I know that I like to manage people and projects and budgets and, you know, all these types of things. But this all ends up being a labor of love, whether it be taking a chance, taking a risk, or taking the time to make the changes in our community that we need. And one other thing was Vic mentioned in the chat. She reminded me of someone that is in the placemaking world, a dear friend of Lauren and I. Her name is Jay Pitter. And she's awesome. She's out of Toronto, but she's often brought in to Detroit to consult on different projects. And she said, urban development should not be something that happens to you. It should be, it's something that we have control over, you know, whether we're just people in the community or we're the people coming in to orchestrate these things. So yeah, it's a really helpful discussion for me with just listening to the feedback and the questions, and continuing to learn from Saundra and Lauren.
Yeah. Karen had a great question. You know, you are all now leaders in your field. You're considered leaders. And I think with that comes a probably incorrect assumption that you're now sort of included into all of the sort of environments, or invited to the tables and a part of those rings that you want to. Karen's question is, where do you still feel excluded, even after all of this work that you've done and into these leadership roles that you've worked hard to get into?
That's deep. No.
Karen, not me. She did it.
Is that Karen Burton? I know she always is tough questions. Yeah, okay. She pushes me. Karen does. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So I would say almost you still. I feel like I'm always still learning, even though I've been growing. Because as a new door opens up, like you said, you get that the nervousness, not thinking that you're able to tackle this next task is in front of you as you grow. You I would say still try to reach out to people who are mentoring at a level that's above you. So getting access still to people who are doing even more than you are, I think is the next gate, because they can help you through, some of those issues and questions that you're having, or ways to talk to people or approach a certain person you're trying to approach. So it's still gaining that next level of mentorship, I think, is the next thing. Because like I said, certain people are in your life just for a season or a reason. It's just finding that next person to help you through that next opening you're trying to get to. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, there's always another closed door ahead.
Yeah.
Is this a question posed to all three of us, or
Up
just
to you.
whoever?
Depends on if you want to answer it.
It's kind of a heavy question when you think you've crossed as many barriers as there are, coming at you. For me, I still feel excluded in situations where I still have to prove myself and prove that I'm capable of doing something. I don't know if it's because I look young. I'm 50. No, I'm not. I'm just joking. I don't know if it's because, the color of my skin. Sometimes I know that's a factor. I mean, just there the situations that remind me of this is having to go in, and if I want to ask for a promotion, I have to like give a long list of why I deserve a promotion when I'm pretty sure I'm not even, like, the fact that I'm here, you can, I think that speaks for itself. Like, I must have done something. I'm not just here because I want more money. I here because I know what my worth is, and I might have come in at this level and have reached this level, but I'm not going to perform this task that's up here for money that does not match, you know? And so I'm always having to, and I think women in general have to do that with fighting for what they're worth. And then as far as just, it just seems like people, when people's just like, they don't have any other reason to doubt you. Even this might have been someone I haven't worked with, but for example, this is something that actually happened to me, and I do appreciate these conversations. I don't mind being candid. I think that's why people ask me to speak at different things, but I don't mind sharing my experiences because they're going to help us all grow as women, as Black women, as leaders, you know, as partners in this. When I was promoted to project manager, and I was at a diversity and inclusion event in the office, and I was just talking. One of my coworkers asked me what I was working on, and I told him about the new project endeavor and about the promotion. And the first thing that came out of his mouth was, "What happens when you fail? What happens when you fail?" Not, I don't even, I mean, that tells me what his expectation was, you know. And this is someone that I saw in a positive light, who I thought he was very smart and someone that I like to work with, but it was just devastating. It's like, it's here it is, it's 2020, and these are still questions in people's minds. So that is exclusion for me, just having to always prove myself. I'm fighting with myself most of the time on making sure I can encourage myself to keep going and do things that are new to me. But to have someone else just be there to, I mean, maybe I can use that as motivation. Like, that's how I'll do it. Just, I can prove to you that I'm capable of doing it. So.
Lauren, anything to add?
It's a tricky one, because I feel like, yes, there are good old boy conversations happening around development in the city that I'm not invited to. So there are.
There.
What I've come to realize is I want to work on writing RFPs. Like, I'm usually in the process, like toward the very end of a planning process, like, we need an engagement person. But what I realized, what is considered engagement as part of like a scope of work is far less comprehensive than it should be. So like, even on a current project I'm working on, myself and the other engagement consultant had to fight to be at like the planning discussions. They're like, well, it's not time for a meeting. Why do you want to participate? I'm like, we're also planners. Like, just because we do engagement well doesn't mean we aren't also trained in planning disciplines. So we had to fight to get into a conversation on a team we were hired to work on. So I feel like it's interesting that I assume when I'm on a consultant team with people, I already assume they're competent and I'll just listen to what they say because they're on my team. But I have said stuff on the team where I feel like I'm still being questioned. I'm like, did you Google me? I'm a thought leader. Like, why are you questioning what I have proposed for engagement when I am an expert at engagement? But it's clear that they just hadn't done their research. So I'm like, do I need to get out there more so that people understand that I know what I'm talking about? Like, I've facilitated thousands of hours of community conversations. So don't question me when I tell you what's gonna work and what's not gonna work. But it still happens all the time. Something else I'm realizing is often when I'm on a team or working with folks, the person of color is like top of their field, like publishes things, is a noted speaker, but the white guys are just like the middle management at the engineering or the architecture firm. It's really interesting. Maybe it's true for women as well across the board, but I'm noticing like some of these folks are just regular folks And then you've got people that are like recognized as experts and we can't get our voices heard in the conversation. That's, I don't know, that dynamic is challenging for me.
I can completely relate to that. We always, as someone who has to schedule a lot of people to speak on a lot of topics, if you're ever at the end of your rope and it's very last minute and you don't have any time to like for someone to prepare, you have a last minute exchange, I always say, yeah, just ask a middle-aged white guy to do it because he's confident that whatever he can say for an hour is worth hearing. Like,
And that's how he'll be received most
like,
of the time.
Yeah, no problem. What do you want me to, you know what? Doesn't matter what you want me to talk about. They'll enjoy it. Well, okay. So we're a few minutes over. I'm gonna give everybody a last, 1.5, 90 seconds. What are your parting thoughts to the women in this group? Think of it as a call to action. What should people be doing tomorrow, next week, next year?
Okay, I'll start. Maybe we can quickly go in the order that we presented. Just wanted to reiterate my points and maybe I'll try to put them in the chat. Seeking out points of exclusion, identifying situational challenges, recognizing personal biases, providing equivalent experiences, extending these solutions to everyone. That's it for me. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Tiffany. That was great.
Yeah, she was very ready to go, right? No, but I would say definitely always think about who's not at the table. Think about the young generation and think about ways you can outreach and actually give them in office, in-person experiences in your respective businesses. And the last thing would be is consider everybody's viewpoint and history when talking to them and have some empathy. Thank you for having us.
That's fantastic, Saundra. That's a really good point because I think to Lauren's point earlier, we don't even always know what people's past histories are. And, people don't always do their research. So making sure that you're leaving space for people to sort of identify what those are is really important. Thank you for that. Lauren?
I want to say stay vigilant. So there's a lot of conversation like after George Floyd about, is this a trend or is this like just the way that we are? And I think it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we decide that this is the new way that we are, then it is. So I would say on a daily basis, be asking yourself, what did you do to ensure that this is a legit paradigm shift and not just like a passing trend? Every day.
Yeah. Intention. That's so great. Thank you so much, ladies, for spending time with us today. As always, you inspire, and everything that you sort of talk about and say just gives me 50 things that, makes me think like, okay, things we need to dig into deep tomorrow. So thanks for creating that extra workload. Happy to take it on, happy to do it. And as per usual, we'll be reaching out for your input on that. So we are going to go into some breakout sessions for the next 20 minutes and I appreciate also everybody being so active in the chat. It makes it so much more engaging when all of you are sort of answering with and for each other. So I love that. And so we're going to go into these breakout sessions and give everybody an opportunity to sort of debrief. What did you hear? Plan, get into cahoots with each other. Let's let's make plans for tomorrow and next week. Thank you so much, ladies. We appreciate you sharing your time and talent with us.
Do we go to a breakout too, or do we peace out?
Your choice.
Okay.
I'm going to finish my sentence. Oh, sure, we can expand that to a national program and take all of the credit for it. Nobody knows what I'm talking about, but everybody knows I'm salty enough that, you know, you get the gist.
I think you should. I think you should make this a national program. As someone who's from out of town, it's an amazing program. Thank you.
You can't.
Kathy, I want to present, we might as well present this idea to the full group, even though Victoria on the line and Jill really have been baking it. And in some of the broader conversations, which I don't know if I'm early on giving information that I shouldn't be yet. You guys can count on me. We are talking about an initiative when we talk about, you know, what minorities and diversity, there's all these opportunities where we're expanding, looking at what development looks like and just even developers. But the challenge, and Jill and I learned a lesson that, you know, we had to raise equity this year. We started our own development company after, you know, 25 years of being in the business, what it was to raise equity and actually get, you know, into the marketplace. And I was very lucky working with Bernie in the past that I had an opportunity to have, you know, small percentage ownership in projects that I had worked on. So I at least have a small portfolio along with that experience. But the challenge is when we talk about minorities emerging into the marketplace, it becomes really difficult because they may have the experience from working in projects, but they don't have the portfolio, they don't have the expertise to make it across the board. So what if we could do a collaborative that we could bring emerging women or minorities into a project? I specifically, and I know Jill agrees with me, would be willing to give a small percentage away of my ownership to women who are willing to come and put sweat equity into projects and help, you know, get even those women who are starting incremental developments in their communities, because you know, these funds and these emerging developers, it's very difficult to break into that marketplace. There might be funding there, but, you know, how are you able to be underwritten and what does that look like? So we're exploring that here in Michigan about doing a collaborative effort of, you know, bringing women into small percentages into our projects. And I mean, we've had some high level discussion on other collaboratives for women just emerging and maybe are at the beginning of their careers that they could put sweat equity into projects, you know, because a lot of us are doing very large projects, transformational projects with different tax credits, just to get that on their resume as they make that transition and move forward in their careers. So it's real world experience, you know, that's going to really impact them and help them build that portfolio. And I mean, I would love to take credit for it, but you know, Victoria, Jill, and some others have been baking that idea. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I do.
Thank you, Shannon. I wish I had more prepared to follow up. But yeah, it's something that we've been working on with a small group of women and small group of developers to figure out the logistics of how we can move forward and make it actionable. These groups are great and we have so many partnerships. We want to make sure there's an actionable item for women who want to become developers but aren't quite ready to leave their full-time jobs, or make sure they have the experience levels, the financial credits, everything they need lined up to make them successful. Because sometimes when people try and leave their positions and do a development project, then they realize how much goes into it, and it could be a failed opportunity, but we want to make them fail better and achieve those opportunities in more successful ways that will set them up for better opportunities in the future and collaboration.
Victoria or Shannon, are we concluding here, or do we have additional topics? I just want to make sure that we thank all the women. 2020 has just been bananas, and Shannon, Victoria, Carissa, thank you so much for keeping this going and keeping these relationships connected. The purpose of starting this whole series was to bring women together and to develop relationships and hopefully spark opportunities for partnerships and collaboration. But 2020 has been interesting, and we've started planning for 2021. We continue to keep this going. I love that we've been successful reaching out of state. Kathy, it was so nice to meet you, and thanks for joining. And so again, want to say thank you to all of you for your participation and keeping this going during this crazy time.
Thank you. I'll say one other thing. LaShawn Pinkard is on with me too. So there are several of us in Birmingham that really like to keep this conversation going. And Shannon, I love your idea. Again, we're open for collaboration and any thoughts between Birmingham and Detroit and Michigan and Alabama. So thanks for having us again.
Thanks so much for coming, Kathy and Stacy and Shannon. Thanks so much for your leadership. This has been a crazy year. I will say that we have talked with the new director of WLI at National last week, and we are very hopeful that 2021 is going to show a launch of this Build Up Breakfast Network on a national scale. So get cozy with the 50 people that were on the call, because, you know, it might be 500 come next year. So we're super excited.
All right, everyone, take care.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Happy New Year.
Love seeing all your faces.
Bye.